Today we have Craig West from Succession Plus. He's the founder and strategic advisor. Thank you for accepting my invitation
Pleasure.
to attend this interview. First and foremost, I would like to ask, how do you decide whether selling the business or succession or even management buying, or like selling out, is a good option for the company?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of key things in that. The first one is certain companies at certain stages, sizes, financial performance are right or wrong for different exit strategies. So, for example, somebody comes in and says, I want to list my company on the ASX. It has to be a certain size. It has to have a certain number of parameters. And that's not right for most small businesses. So the first thing you've got to do is sort of work out of the 10 different ways you could exit, which ones would actually work for that company. Secondly, and probably most importantly, is what is the owner actually trying to achieve? So it's no good me saying to the owner, well, we're going to sell to a private equity firm if they want to make sure the business is ready for their kids, for example. So you've got to be a little bit selfish as an owner and work out actually what is the goal, what are you trying to achieve, what's the outcome you're looking for. And then our job is not to tell you which one's right or wrong, but to help you get ready for that. So if it is about preparing the business for your children to take over, there's a different set of things you have to do to if you wanted to sell to private equity, for example.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed a lot of big companies, they plan about their exit for like 5-6 years before the actual process happens. However, when it comes to small businesses, they think of exit like straight away.
Yeah.
And they'll be like panicking, what do I do now?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of people haven't got the message about preparation for exit. Larger corporates have, larger companies have typically. They've typically got board structures with experienced directors and advisors that know what it's like and what needs to be done. There's a hell of a lot to do to prepare for an exit, even for a small business. And so, my answer is the longer you've got to prepare, the better. No one's ever said to me, I wish we didn't start so soon. But a lot of people have said, we left it too late. And so that's a trap because unfortunately as a business, you're really busy, right? You're doing things day to day. You've got so many things to worry about. You sort of go, I'll sort out the exit later. I'll sort it out later. And then next minute you've turned 69 and you're going, oh my God, now I've got to retire. Oh, it's too late. So the message is, 3 to 5 years out, you've got to start thinking about it. And so talking to an advisor, getting a board structure together, putting someone on the board who's actually experienced an exit, either themselves or for clients, who can actually help you through that process and just make it a bit easier.
Mm-hmm. What would you advise for a small company who's planning for an exit? What would the first step be?
First step should always be to get a valuation done, to work out what you've actually got. Because unlike our home or a real estate asset, it's not that easy to value a small to medium business. They're complicated assets. So there's a lot of moving parts. And a lot of owners, I would say most owners, don't know what their business is actually worth. And more importantly, they don't know what it could be worth. So my business today is worth $4.5 million, but could it actually be sold for $6 million if I spent 3 years doing certain things? And the answer is normally yes, but they don't know where they're starting from and they don't know what they're going to get to. So start with a valuation, get a really good idea, a deep dive about your business. What have you actually got? What are the risks? What are the challenges? What are the problems and issues? And then how do I get it ready for exit?
Mm-hmm. I loved how you say a lot of people doesn't know their potential of their company's valuation. Is there any specific example that Succession Plus has done? Maybe they have multiplied their values or anything, like good example?
Yeah, we've got a stack. So we've done, more than 1,000 valuations on privately owned companies in Australia. The owner never gets a number right. If you ask the owner beforehand, what's it worth? They say 5 million, it's worth 10. They say 12 million, it's worth 8. They just don't know. And that's because they're complicated assets. What makes that worse is most business owners are entrepreneurial risk takers. They're naturally built like that. Otherwise, they wouldn't own a business, right? They'd go and work for somebody. Because they're entrepreneurial risk takers, they're good at growth. And when you ask them, how do you grow the value of your business? They give you answers like more sales, open another office, sell more products. It's all about growth, which is partly right. But what they don't do is assess the risk. And small, privately owned companies in the SME market are risky assets. And so that risk is really important to get. A, what is the risk and why? And B, what can I do about it? And that's where the value potential is. It's often not about, you need another $10 million of sales or you need to put on 20 more people. It's more about make the money you're making now, but reduce the risk. because in most small businesses, there's a lot of risk. And whether you're a buyer, a lender, an investor, risk is not your friend. So they're looking to reduce the risk, manage the risk rather than invest into it.
So valuation is the step number one. However, within that step, how do you make your valuation, like add a zero to it? Or what would be the first step within the valuation step?
Yeah, so there's a fair few things that make up the valuation. Obviously, everyone knows about profit and profit performance and how you improve, that number. And hopefully most people can get to that. An accountant can help you with that or whatever it is. What most people don't know are the other parts. So what about industry, for example? There are some industries at the moment that are hot, that are the flavour of the month that everybody wants to invest in or grow. There are other industries that are suffering from the economy, suffering from tariffs, suffering from disruption from technology, and they're not as attractive anymore. So you've got to take that into account. And then lastly, all the non-financial aspects. So the HR, the systems, the IT, cybersecurity, the people management, have you got all your staff locked in? And the biggest risk of all, obviously, is the owner. A lot of our small to medium business clients are very dependent on the owner. So by fixing those things, you can always add to the valuation. A business, for example, that's not owner dependent, where the owner doesn't work 6-7 days a week, where they're not required for every part of the business, can go away to Europe for 3 weeks on a holiday and not answer emails all day, that's more valuable than the same business making the same profit that is dependent on the owner. And you can extend that through every aspect of the operation. So, if you look at professional services firms are a good example at the moment. We do a lot of work with engineers and architects in the built environment space. Their biggest problem has been for years now in Australia, a very tight labour market. It's very difficult to get good people. And it's very difficult to lock good people in. So that's a big risk for them. If I'm going to go and buy one of those firms, not that I'm an engineer or an architect, but if I could, and I did, then my first question, probably my second question, my first question is, who are your clients and how do they pay you and how many have you got and how do I know they're going to keep coming back? Secondly, who are your key people? Who are doing the work and how do I know they're going to stay? Because if they leave, I've got a very big problem. Doesn't matter how many clients I've got now because I can't service them. So just looking at those things within a business, and there's probably 100 things like that we could find, and each time you fix one of those things, it adds to the valuation. So part of the valuation process should be to identify all those things. What are all the things that I should go away and work on, and knowing that by working on all of those, I'm going to improve the valuation.
I was just going to talk about that because a lot of people who I've met, startup owners, founders, they have said that they haven't had their holiday for last 3 or 4 years because they've been working on the company. However, when it comes to selling the business, the investor is not going to buy that person, the owner. It's going to buy the company. So how do you solve this issue?
Yeah, people, owners particularly, have that problem. They're all quite proud of the fact that they work 7 days a week and they work 24 hours and they sit at home, with the family watching the TV, but they're actually on their iPad typing out emails. And that's good because they're committed and they're working and they obviously love what they're doing and they're passionate about solving a particular problem. From a buyer, investor, lender point of view, it's terrible because what they've actually created is a job, not a business. And so unless you play soccer for Manchester United, you can't sell a job. So you've got to really think about, how do I create a business that's attractive, sale ready, and not dependent on me? Because if it's dependent on you, it's very hard.
Another thing a lot of founders ask is that I want to sell my business. However, I don't think anyone else can do this business as much as I am doing right now. Do you think it's better to train another person who will be as good as you? Or do you think, what is the other option?
The other option is train and get a person that's better than you. And there's a lot of them around. I employ quite a few people in my business that are younger than me, smarter than me. They're very focused on technology and AI and, they know what to do in that space. Now I'm nearly 60. That's too late for me to work that out. I'm not doing that, right? But I'm smart enough to also know, go and employ the people who are good at that, can do it. And then I think the problem is for most business owners, they're typically control freaks, right? They want to micromanage everything. They want to keep their eye on everything. And so what happens is employees aren't encouraged to make decisions. They're unencouraged to go and do things on their own because I know better. I can do it better. I do it this way. You should do it my way. It's actually not wrong. It's counterintuitive to think about the fact that what you need to do is actually encourage people to make their own decisions, make mistakes. Like, I've made plenty of mistakes. We all make mistakes. But in businesses, you've got to encourage that. You've got to encourage people to learn, encourage them to take risks, encourage them to try something new, because often it will work. And if you can create a culture and an environment where that's encouraged and innovation is celebrated, not why are you doing it that way, we should be doing it this way, then you do get that culture. You get improvements, you get innovation, you get lots of ideas, and hopefully you can reduce the dependence on yourself. You can start to be less relied upon to make decisions and direct people, because people can direct themselves. If you're employing smart people, it's really just about trusting them to do the right thing and make the right decisions. And they won't always, because they haven't got the experience that I've got or whatever it is. But over time, you can get to that point. And I think you can get to that point, it becomes a very valuable business, because then it's not about you.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to that, do you think it's very important to do an employee ownership rather than selling to a whole another person who doesn't know anything about the business and just transferring your ownership to your employee?
Yeah, you can. I'm a big advocate for employee ownership. I've got one in my business. We've got nearly 200 clients that have got them that we've set up, and they work really well. Like, I can tell you, they work really well. I've actually just had a look at the latest annual data from our clients. And for example, the growth rate for employee-owned companies is much higher than the growth rate for non-employee-owned companies. There's a big difference though. And the key thing is, you don't have to sell the entire business to your employees. We have more than 100 clients where the employees own 10, 20 or 25%, a minority stake. But it's enough of a stake for the key employees to have a real interest in what the company's doing and coming up with ideas and innovations and improvements. And they're rewarded financially the same as an owner, because they're in the employee share plan. So that's one strategy. The other strategy is to sell it to the employees completely. That also works well. And we've got quite a lot of clients that have done that, but it takes time. That's the only downside for an employee share plan. You really can't sell a privately owned company to employees quickly. You can't do it in 6 months or a year. It's going to take years, maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe even 10. For a lot of owners, that are coming back to your original question about starting early, there's a good reason to start early. If you've got enough time, an employee share plan might be a good option for you. We're also seeing a lot of family-owned businesses where the founders or mum and dad want to keep it in the family, but the kids might not want to run it, or they might not have the skills to run it. So they put an employee share plan in and say, well, the family's going to keep 75% of this forever, but I want the 5 people that are running it to own 5% each in a share plan. Therefore, we're aligned. We've got the same interests. They're going to work just as hard as my family to grow the value, because they've actually got an interest in it. And so we're starting to see a lot more acceptance of employee share plans. There's been a lot of government rule changes in the last 10 years that have improved them. And there's a lot more take up in the economy. People are starting to understand how they work and why they work. And I think, look, generally, as long as they're set up properly and the education is done well, they're a good outcome for a lot of business. Not right for everybody, but it's a good outcome for a lot of businesses.
We're organizing Business Exit Summit for the first time and only time. This will be the last time as well. And we actually spoke with a lot of founders, and we noticed that a lot of founders are saying that we're not planning for exit.
Yeah.
However, what we believe is that it's good to have in your back in your mind, just to have an exit plan. It doesn't matter if you're going to exit or not, but it's a good thing to have a plan. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would be much stronger than that. I would say if you own a business and you haven't got an exit plan, you're an idiot. Like, seriously, if you are spending all your time, effort and money building up the value of a business, what for if you don't know how to get out of it? It's absolutely crazy. And let me tell you one other, I'm very passionate about this question. Let me tell you one other thing. They will all exit. All of them. They have no choice. They will all exit. They do have a choice about whether they manage and plan that exit or whether it happens to them. And I've seen businesses where it happens to the founder. It's not good. It's never a good outcome. So my message to owners and founders is, do not ignore the exit. It cannot be ignored. You will exit at some point. And the earlier and the better you plan it, the better outcome you'll get.
Thank you for such a strong statement for this interview. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
Pleasure.